Hello, and welcome to another episode of Disrupt Your Now, the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to shake things up. Before we get started, I want to let you know that some friends of mine and I are having an event at Quantico this weekend at Cyberbytes Foundation for military families. We're having everything from sim racing to virtual virtual reality gun range. I'll be there talking to people about entrepreneurship, all kinds of cool things. And the professional race car driver that I work with will be there with one of his cars. So anybody up in that area, anybody in Virginia, Maryland that wants to come and have some fun with us, come to it. Cyberbike Foundation at Quantico. And you can check out my LinkedIn if you want to learn more about it. So tonight, speaking of the military, I have a retired military guy, Brad McDonald, who was the skipper of a submarine. And so to me, subs are just so interesting. But Brad now in his second life is an entrepreneur and a leadership expert and in training in sales and leadership. So, Brad, I want you to scoot over and let people see that handsome young fella behind you. Look at him on his submarine. I love that picture. Okay, now you can sit back there. I just wanted everybody to see it. I just think that's so cool. So tell us more about your background, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, thanks for having me, Lisa. I'll give you the first introduction that I typically give a group of salespeople. When I get in front of them, I say, my name is Brad McDonald. When I was 12 years old, I attended a Scottish boys boarding school where I was beaten and whipped on a very regular basis. And after that, I spent 4 years at a Catholic boys military high school in Washington, D.C., where some retired World War II vintage Army sergeants taught me how to march with a rifle at the age of 15. After that, I spent 4 years of occasional solitary confinement at a federal institution on the banks of the Severn River in Annapolis, Maryland. And then the next 20 years of my life were mostly underwater inside a steel tube with 100 other 10 smelly men. None of those experiences prepared me for the emotional trauma that I faced when I retired from the Navy and became a commissioned salesperson. But Sandler training, which is what I got into, fixed all that emotional trauma for me. So there's my first introduction.
Well, that's hilarious because basically the whole thing about the Scottish school and just everything, it sounds like you were in a prison for all those years and then you broke free. But that's very interesting. So one day you need to write your life story. But you've also written a book. Tell us the name because I'll mess it up.
Well, the name of the book is The Art and Skill of Sales Psychology. And one of the things that I love doing, I'm not saying I'm great at it, I'm just saying I like doing it, is writing and writing articles. When I had my business, when I was an entrepreneur, writing articles and submitting them to business journals and the newspaper was a good way to get some free publicity. And eventually I had probably almost 200 articles that were published over the years. And I took about 40 of them that were along the same theme, which was the psychology involved in the sales process, both for the salesperson and for the buyer. Mm-hmm. And we turned it into a book.
Well, I have actually ordered your book, so I can't wait to read it. But I'm also really excited to talk with you about sales because I don't think I've had another guest on yet who really is specifically talking about that. It always comes up, but it's a topic that I'm really interested in because, as I told you before the show, I suck at selling for myself. Not at my old businesses, but when I'm selling my own knowledge, I don't know, I feel creepy. And I'm sure that there are a lot of other people who are entrepreneurs who feel the same way. So I'm thrilled to have you on here talking with us about how we can get better at it, but also how we can help our clients understand what we do more.
Yeah. When I retired from the Navy, most people that would leave the Navy or the military at the stage that I was at would the most likely place to go would be into the defense industry
Yep.
and to work at a defense contractor, which is fine if that's what you want to do,
Yeah.
because you can make a good living and stay real busy there. That never appealed to me at all. And I'm not 100% sure why, but it just sounded torturous to me. And when I was a child, I remember my first memory of money was when I was 6 years old and a lady down the street asked me to carry some firewood from the backyard up onto her porch. And after I carried many pieces, she said, "That's enough for today." And she gave me a dime and a nickel and 2 Tootsie Rolls. And that's my first recollection of making money for doing something. And I was ecstatic. I had no idea I was going to get 15 cents and 2 Tootsie Rolls. So from that time on, all through grade school and high school, I would walk up and down the street, knock on doors. "Can I cut your grass?" I loved it when it snowed in Washington, D.C. Go out and start, would you like your walk shoveled for 25 or 50 cents? So that idea of doing something and getting paid for it was always intriguing to me. But the defense industry was not. And so I wanted to find a career after the U.S. Navy that was what I thought is honorable and respected as being a submarine captain. So I became a life insurance salesman.
Well, first of all, I want to say my husband was the same as you. When he retired, he did not want to stay in the defense industry, not because there's anything wrong with it, but he just wanted to do something different.
Yeah, yeah, I feel his pain.
Yeah.
And so I did actually. I mean, I was, we call ourselves financial advisors because we advised on investing, but the way we made most of our money was through life insurance sales. And I had been what I thought was a pretty tough guy in the Navy. Was, fearless submarine driver, going out chasing the Soviets and everybody else and not afraid to die for my country. But when I came out of the Navy and went into sales and had to pick up the telephone to make my first cold call, I was terrified. I could not understand what was so hard about making a phone call. And that kind of began my quest to solve that emotional problem or that emotional roller coaster that salespeople find themselves on. That's
cool that instead of just saying, "Okay, I'm giving this up because this is not my bag," you decided you wanted to crack that nut and figure it out, right?
I did. What happened is I just kept at it. I do remember 3 months into my financial advisor career, the first month that's when you sell to all your friends. And the second month, there's a little residual. And the third month, there's nothing.
Yeah.
And I really was very distraught. And I remember a Friday morning being at the breakfast table, half crying in my oatmeal. And my wife came in the kitchen and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I think it's all over." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Nobody's buying anything. I don't think this is going to work." And she said, "Get out of this house and go to work. You said you were doing this for 2 years, no matter what."
Funny.
So I did. And that night I went to a party and I met 5 prospects at the party that became clients within a month.
Wow.
And so that was kind of the low point. But there's still lots of ups and downs after that. But a year into it, I got a phone call from a man that I did not know. And he introduced himself as a sales coach. I thought, I did not know what a sales coach was. Like, what do people need a sales coach for? And in 2 short phone calls, he asked me a few questions, and I thought, this makes sense. And I paid him what seemed like a princely sum just to talk to him on the phone 30 minutes a week for 6 months. It was transformational for me. It was nothing short of miraculous how it changed my mindset, my approach to selling. I stopped the aggressive selling. I relaxed. I got rid of a lot of the negative messages in my head. I liked what he did so much for me that about a year and a half later, I thought, I want to do that. And that's how I eventually became the owner of a Sandler training office in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay. So Sandler Training, explain to people what that is.
Sandler Training, the company in Owings Mills, Maryland, right outside Baltimore, is Sandler Systems. And so Sandler Training is the affectionate term we use. Sandler Systems or Sandler Training is a worldwide international sales management, and leadership training, coaching, and mentoring organization.
Okay.
And there are two sort of approaches. One is that the company has 220 franchises. Most of them are in the United States and Canada, and there's a good number in Great Britain and Europe, and even some in Asia and Mexico and South America. So those are owned by individual entrepreneurs who are trained by Sandler Systems to deliver the Sandler selling system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I started. I started one of those.
Okay.
The joke at Sandler Systems is that Sandler Systems is a company to whom you give your entire life savings, and in return, you get the right to sit in your basement and make cold calls. Because I do. That was the second. The first journey into entrepreneurship was to be a financial advisor and insurance salesman, pay your own way, commission only. And then the second leap of faith was to start a Sandler office in southeastern Virginia, where essentially no business owners had heard of me. I really didn't know any business owners. I hardly knew what a business owner was, and there was nobody had heard of Sandler training.
Yeah.
So we started that, and then over 12 years, built that up. I sold it, and then the headquarters hired me to be a national coach and trainer.
That's awesome. What a trajectory. So tell us, let's rewind to the man that you said you spoke with 30 minutes a week, the coach that you had. Tell us some of the biggest lessons that you learned from him.
The first thing I would say, the biggest lesson was when I was not expecting to learn at all, which was that sales is an emotional roller coaster, and you have to fortify yourself mentally. And one of the terms we use in Sandler training is head trash, and that's all the negative things that you believe about sales, selling, money, things like that. So a very simple example of a discovery he helped me make was, and it sounds small, but it was big, was that I was getting ready at the day we had our weekly call. Later that day, I had a family coming in for our second meeting, which was the closing meeting, to close them on the financial plan, hopefully to close. And I mentioned to him that one of the things that always kind of bothered me a little bit was having to ask them for a check to start the insurance policy. And he said, time out. Why does that bother you? And we did some exploration and started digging into the childhood messages that I was brought up with. If, for example, when I was in fourth grade, we walked across the street because the family across the street had bought a new car, and that family's name was Kennedy. And I said, Mrs. Kennedy, how much did the car cost? I was about 8 years old. What do you think my mother said to me when I asked Mrs. Kennedy how much the car cost?
You don't ask about things like that.
Right. It was rude. Yeah. And so that was a stern warning not to ask about money. And then a few years later, I was in ninth grade at that Catholic Boys Military High School in Washington, D.C. And my mother, in a conversation with me at home, found out that I was borrowing dimes and quarters from boys in the lunchroom to buy ice cream sandwiches. And my mother, my little 92-pound mother, who today is 92 years old and probably about 82 pounds, she pulled me down into her face and she said, don't ever let me hear that you're asking people for money. We don't do that in this family. McDonald's do not ask people for money. So two strong messages. We don't ask for money and we don't ask about money. And what do salespeople have to do every day? They have to ask somebody for money. So the coach helped me make that connection that some of the beliefs that we are brought up with are not conducive to good selling. Chances are when you were a 7-year-old girl, your mother or father told you don't talk to strangers.
Yep.
Pretty good message for a 7-year-old girl. But for a 27-year-old woman who's a salesperson, don't talk to strangers is not a useful message.
That's right.
So that was one thing that he taught me. And then he taught me a better system for selling and taught me the power of being confident enough to walk away from the sale and to see no as a victory as opposed to a defeat.
Yeah, to walk away when you felt like it wasn't right. So you make the decision to walk away?
That's one case, walk away when I feel like it's not right, or close the file when somebody wants to eternally think it over, never wants to make a decision. to learn how to help lead the buyer to a yes or no decision. Either one's okay. I'm okay with yes. I'm okay with no. What I'm not okay with is spending the next 6 months playing cat and mouse with each other and thinking it over. So once I stopped thinking no was a defeat and started realizing no could be my second favorite word in the English language, it became much easier.
That's like one of my friends, she and her husband wrote the book Go for No. And they teach a whole system that, you know, breaking that thought that we have that no is a bad word, because every no gets you closer to a yes. So that's kind of similar. Tell me about the sales system that he helped you set up.
Well, traditional selling relies on what I would call feature and benefits and presentations. And when you think about the average person coming to your house to look at your windows, or you go to the car lot to look at a car, generally the salesperson's system is to ask a couple questions. What are you looking for? And then start presenting, filling you with information, brochures, facts, and figures. Once the presentation is done and the salesperson has given away all their information, then the only thing left really for the salesperson is to press the prospect to buy, to close the deal. So it's create a little bit of interest with some questions, and then do a presentation, and then trial close. The most cases, the buyer is not yet ready to buy just from seeing a presentation. And so the buyer, if they don't want to buy at that moment, they'll do what all buyers do. They'll raise an objection. And frequently the objections don't really have a lot to do with reality. It's just a way to say, not now. So when the buyer raises the objection, the salesperson is trained to overcome the objection. And now you end up in this almost a little bit of an argument where the salesperson is saying, here's why you should buy. And the buyer is saying, here's why I'm not going to buy. And we always believe what's coming out of our own mouth more than we believe what's coming out of somebody else's mouth. So if the salesperson is being positive and the buyer's being negative, well, who's the buyer going to believe? They're going to believe themselves. And this leads to a lot of frustration, a lot of thinking overs, a lot of indecision. So the salesperson has done a lot of work, free consulting, giving away all their information. The buyer's not ready to buy. So what I call that is qualify easy and close hard. Nobody likes to be closed. So the Sandler selling system is just the opposite. It's qualify hard and close easy. And I say we teach people to sell like a doctor. And you think about, what does a doctor do when you go in with a sore shoulder? The doctor asks a lot of questions. When did it start? How does it feel here? How does it feel there? They ask lots of things. They're diagnosing the problem. And when they figure out the real problem, then they offer a solution. So 3 big reasons that people object in sales all focus around, I don't need it, I don't want it. It's not suitable for me. Second big reason is it costs too much. And third objection is I can't make a decision. So suitability, price, ability to decide. And what the Sandler system does is it goes through those 3 things. We call it pain budget decision. But initially, we're having a discussion with the prospect. What kind of problems are you experiencing? Trying to diagnose the problem. Where does it hurt? What is it that you need that I might have? That's dealing with the suitability issue. So it's all about you and the concerns, issues. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to accomplish? If we get a green light there and you need something that I have, then the second thing I want to discuss with you is money, budget. And if you're willing and able to spend the amount that it's going to take for me to fix the problem, then the third thing is, let's talk about how you make decisions. So if I get a green light on you need what I have, you can pay for it, you're willing to pay for it, and you're willing to make a decision, now I will present my solution to you. There's no point in presenting my solution if I know one of those objections is going to come up afterwards. So we deal with the objections up front. That's the big difference.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. You know, for years, well, I've owned a web development company since '96. And before that, I was an accountant. And for years, I would give away all this advice, in the initial talking to people. And then I realized, I'm like, God, I know all this stuff that other people don't. And I'm giving away advice. And if they don't work with me, they're benefiting from the advice, that
Right.
I gave them.
Free consulting.
Right. And it took me a long time to realize they need to be paying for this. So I redid how I approach business, and I use that as a way to qualify people, because if they don't think the knowledge I have is valuable, then they don't need to work with me. They need to go to somebody who can make something pretty. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes.
Instead of somebody who knows strategy and stuff like that.
Yeah, one of our phrases is no more free consulting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I won't share any information with you at all.
Yeah.
I'll tell you things about how I could work with you, but I don't need to provide you the entire solution to your problem.
Right.
So you can take it and have somebody else look at it and say, yeah, we can do this for a cheaper price or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And when I have people come to me like that, and I'm just like, no, typically, unless it's somebody that I already know really well and I'm just giving them feedback of things to ask, I'm like, I'm not going to get into that game of trying to pick apart somebody else's proposal. It's just,
Right.
I just can't stand that. So, all right. So you came up with the new system. Then what would you say is your next biggest leap into improving?
Well, and of course, need to give credit where credit's due. The system belongs to Sandler Systems. It was created by David Sandler. I was just the beneficiary of learning the system.
But the coach before that got you started on that path, and then the formal system was in Sandler. Okay.
Yeah. Well, he taught me Sandler, and he was the first person that ever mentioned the word to Sandler to me. I didn't know what Sandler Systems was.
Okay, gotcha.
Like I said, this was a whole new world to me. And another interesting thing was the idea of investing in myself in the form of paying a coach, because my whole life, military schools, the U.S. Navy, you don't pay anybody to coach you in the Navy. You don't pay to go to the dentist. You don't pay to go to the doctor. If you need legal advice, you go to the legal office. You don't. So the idea of paying somebody was a bit of a foreign concept, but it definitely paid off. No pun intended. It was well worth it. And so I learned the value of investing in myself, lifetime growth, having mentors, coaches, things like that. So the system was powerful. I think the next thing was the thing we touched on a little bit at the beginning was the psychology and the impact of being in a world where so many things, meaning the people you sit in front of, whether they say yes or no, whether you're making a good living or not, affect how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
And that's, in fact, one of the chapters in the book. Chapter is titled, "Oh, the Humility. Are you okay being not okay?" And if I can take a minute, I'll just read a couple lines. So, in the Navy, I was a tough guy. I was captain of an attack submarine, the nemesis of many Soviet skippers, ready to go toe-to-toe with any enemy and willing to face death on a daily basis. If the bad guys weren't enough, every second of every day, Mother Ocean was trying to get in my submarine and swallow me whole. Hey, no problem. Bring it on. Davy Jones' locker, that age-old sailor's euphemism for drowning, did not scare me. I was in my element at sea, and I was definitely okay. How quickly all of that changed when I came into sales and tried to make my first cold call. Suddenly, I was not okay. My hands were shaking. I'm not kidding. They were.
Oh, yeah, I believe you.
My voice was quivering. I stumbled and stuttered through my script, and I was so relieved when the lady I called said no thanks and hung up.
The irony. Get off the phone.
What's that?
Because you were able to get off the phone.
Right. Yeah. The irony of being terrified by a phone call set me on a path to discover the source of my fear and anxiety. Here's what I figured out. The prestige associated with my role as a submarine officer always helped me feel okay about myself. I was respected, revered, and obeyed. In case of doubt, I sported my sheriff's badge that read Commanding Officer. In sales, trying to get leads, trying harder to get leads to return my calls, fighting to keep customers who were being wooed by competitors, prospects taking my valuable proposals and entering the witness protection program, hearing no on a daily basis, all of these things made me not okay. I was not respected, revered, or obeyed, and I wasn't the captain, and I wasn't a big shot. I wasn't a big shot. So at the ripe old age of 40 plus, I had to dig down deep and find something to like about myself. Beyond my titles and status in the world, I had to learn to be okay being not okay. So that was probably the next most important thing, was to learn to be okay with the status of being a salesperson.
Yeah.
And to stop looking for status in my roles in life and titles and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a couple of the lessons that came out of this chapter. It said, if you ever find the frustrations, humiliation, and embarrassment of sales seem to outweigh the success, consider a few points. One, selling is a Broadway play put on by a psychiatrist. Buying is and should be an emotional experience for the prospect, but not for the seller. If you become emotionally involved in the outcome of sales calls, it'll be hard to close the deal. Keep your composure and objectivity as a psychiatrist does. Second thing, always let your buyer preserve their dignity. You don't have to let people abuse you, but it's also not smart to focus on your own feelings. Help other people feel okay about themselves. Mm-hmm. And I learned to do that in a sales call. And third, finally, stop trying to look so professional. Just try struggling a little bit. I mean, in the Navy, I was always about looking totally put together.
Yeah.
And when I started in the investment insurance business, I wanted to be so perfect, mm-hmm. all that. And then I realized people didn't like this. Stop trying to look so professional. Try struggling a little bit. One way to get people to be comfortable around you is to not have all the answers. Don't be a know-it-all. Learn to struggle a little bit naturally. Prospects might want to bail you out. Be not okay on purpose. It took a long time, but I finally arrived in a place where prospects and selling no longer control how I feel about myself. I'm okay without my sheriff's badge, and I'm okay being not okay. How about you? Are you okay in the world of sales? You're a winner because of what is inside of you, not what's happening on the outside. Remember that, and you'll always be okay being not okay.
Those are great tips, and it reminds me so much when we started our first business. It was when my husband was retiring. And we started our first business, and I've been doing cold calls from home. And then he took a day off from work, and we went out in the car and made cold calls. Mm. And the very first one he went into, of course, he got a no, and he came out. He was so upset. He goes, I am never doing that again. I go, yes, you are. But anyway, the irony is that he ended up being in sales for over 20 years. You know, after we started our business, built it up, sold it, started another one, built it up, sold it. And then he went to work as an employee in sales for like 20 years. So it's so funny how once you work through those things, you know, and you realize everybody goes through it, that once you work through it and get to that place in your head, it isn't so hard.
You've been asking me sort of the path that I was on, and if it's okay if I continue that a little bit.
Sure.
Now it's along the same line, but we were just talking about being okay about yourself and being okay not having all these big titles, just being a salesperson. Mm-hmm. And in Salmon, we call that the division between your image and your role. The role being the things you do in life, which constantly change, and your image, which you control. So the next thing I learned was that salespeople have some common areas that hold them back, and we call this head trash. And here's a chapter that I wrote on head trash. I'll just paraphrase it. Have you ever attended a one-day sales seminar packed with great closing tactics, nifty ideas for overcoming objections, and slick methods for delivering rock'em sock'em presentations, only to find yourself a few days later doing the same things you did before the seminar? What happened? Where did all the great ideas go? Why didn't you implement what you learned? So, and then I go on to tell the story when I was 16 years old, and my father, who never pushed me very hard, he was a very encouraging father, most wonderful, nurturing father, but he never said, you got to do this or you got to do that. He was always, what do you want to do? But he did offer me at the age of 16 to take some golf lessons. And he was quite a prolific golfer. So I said, all right, I'll take some golf lessons. And so he paid this pro to give me several lessons. We lived in Washington, D.C. That's where I went to that Catholic Boys Military High School. And after the pro gave me several lessons, he said, okay, it's time for you to play around on your own. And I'll never forget that day at the Walter Reed golf course. I went out there by myself, put my ball on the tee at the first tee, and I looked to my right, and four, what seemed like old men, they were probably not that old, but they seemed old to me. They walked up behind me and stood there and stared at me. And I looked at these guys and I was terrified because I knew I was going to do something stupid. And I said, why don't you all golf first and I'll wait for you. And they're, oh, no, there's one of you, there's four of us, you go ahead and go. So as I pick it up here, their staring made me a nervous wreck. After three lousy shots, I still was not far enough along on the fairway for them to tee off. It seemed like the whole world was watching me flail. Not wanting to further embarrass myself, I picked up my ball and I went home, and I have not tried golf since.
Oh.
The pro taught me a lot of useful skills and tactics, grips, swings, stances, things like that. But he never touched on the fears and anxieties and doubts that lay between my ears. I didn't have the conceptual tools needed to deal with embarrassment and humiliation, real or imagined. So a lot of short-term sales training gives us tactics, but it doesn't address the kind of problems that go on in our head. Mm-hmm. As I said, it never covers the conceptual problems, the head trash that plague most sales professionals. All the skill training in the world won't help if the head trash is not eliminated. So I found there were about five areas that are common, and most salespeople experience one or more of them. And those five things are buy cycle, B-U-Y cycle. The way you sell is the way you buy, and the way you buy is the way you sell. So, for example, if you always want to, when you're the buyer, if you always want to think it over, price shop, gather proposals, you're probably going to subconsciously encourage that kind of behavior from your prospect. Uh-huh. If you're not good at making decisions, you're probably not going to get other people to make decisions. If you can't make a decision, don't expect your prospect to either. If you want to stop getting think it overs, make this pledge now. Quote, I will never again tell a salesperson I need to think it over. It's yes or no for me, nothing else. So that's the first big problem here. The second one is need for approval. And I don't know about you, but I like it when people like me.
Yeah.
But the problem is in sales, as we get confused, am I in the sales call to make a living, or am I here to make a friend? Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, some of my clients are my best friends. But if we are more worried about, is this person going to like me when I walk out of the room, than are they going to give me a check, we probably have an approval problem. Most human beings want to be liked. It's more fun than being not liked. The problem begins when you want to be liked more than you want to make a sale. A lot of it has to do with not being liked or loved by the right people, like parents, spouses, and friends. So if you end up taking these unmet needs into a sales call, it's going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. So sales is no place to get your emotional needs met. It's a place to go to the bank. So that's the second big problem, is need for approval. The third problem is negative scripts. We kind of already talked about that when we said in fourth grade, I asked how much the car cost. So these things we learn as a child, they tend to affect us negatively later on. The fourth one is becoming emotionally involved. When your mortgage payment depends on making a sale, or when you think you're about to finally close the big one, it's tough to stay objective.
Yeah.
Think about an explosive specialist. You don't want them getting nervous or excited when they're defusing a bomb. Whether it's reality or not, your attitude in front of a prospect should always be, quote, I'd love to work with you, but I'm financially independent and I don't need your business. If you become emotionally involved in the process, you'll find it difficult to be objective, and you won't be able to negotiate from a position of strength. Mm-hmm. And the fifth and final one is money concept. How much do you believe you're worth? I remember how much a person could struggle in that insurance and investment business. You could go a couple of weeks and make zero.
Yeah.
And then you would make one sale, and I made the first time I made $8,000 on a sale, and I felt very guilty about it.
Uh-huh.
I thought, well, all I did was sell an insurance policy with the premium of so this much, but it was hard for me to accept making $8,000 in what seemed like a few hours. I didn't think about the fact, well, I haven't made a nickel in the last 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
So, we have these money concepts. How much do you believe you're worth? If you grew up without a whole lot of money, it's likely deep down you have a belief you're not worth that much. In sales, you can work for days or weeks without making anything, and then one day in an hour, you can make a $9,000 commission. That is, if you can bear the intense negotiating skills of your prospect who's threatening to cancel the sale if you don't lower the price. But if you have a weak money concept, you might start to feel guilty and lower the price and your commission in the process. Remember, you are making exactly what you believe you're worth, not a penny more, not a penny less. So that was the next big thing, was to try to eliminate these conceptual problems in myself and my clients.
Well, and all 5 of those I think they're present in everybody to some extent.
To some extent, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I always tell people that my 2 biggest problems in sales is I'm afraid to ask you for money and I want you to like me. At which point my clients would normally say, you didn't have any problem asking me for money. And I said, well, I learned how to do it.
Yeah.
But you better believe my mother's still on my shoulder saying, that's not nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's funny how the things from our childhood that we don't even think about, that we don't even realize how they do affect our thought patterns and what we do. And the whole thing about guilt. I know what you mean with that, because especially when I'm working with small business clients and stuff, and I'll start thinking, instead of the value that I'm bringing and that this can make them many, many, many multiples, sometimes I will let myself get into that trap of the short term, thinking about the money and feeling guilty about it. So I think that's a common thing.
I understand.
Yeah. Something you said, see, here goes my ADD. Something you said made me think of something I wanted to ask, and now I've forgotten it. And probably as soon as you start talking about something else, I'll remember. What was the last thing you were talking about?
Well, we were talking about okay, not okay, and then we were talking about the conceptual things, the head trash that get in the way with salespeople, and the journey I was on, learning a good sales system, learning to be okay, being not okay, and eliminating all the negative thoughts.
I can't remember what it was. I'm sorry. It'll pop in my head when I don't want it to. What advice do you have for people about prospecting?
Prospecting is, I generally say, if you tell me you enjoy prospecting, you're probably lying. That's not completely true, because there's some people that just do enjoy going out and knocking on doors and trying to meet people. I am not a guy that loves to go make an effort to meet new people. And that's certainly an area where there's a lot of negative head trash, because what did your mother tell you? Don't talk to strangers. Don't bother people. And every time you make a cold call, you feel like you're interrupting somebody. So one of the chapters that I wrote about prospecting was titled "Sit Back, Relax, and Enjoy the Cold Call." And here's how I started that chapter. It's the first and last topic covered at flight attendant and commercial pilot training. Quote, make sure you tell those miserable people stuffed in their undersized seats like sardines with their knees in their chest inside a noisy aluminum tube to, quote, sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. And whenever I hear that on a plane, I just think, are you kidding? How in the world could I possibly enjoy this? It's uncomfortable, confining, and loud. Flying is to my life as prospecting is to my sales. Unnecessary but unpleasant duty. But if I'm going to visit faraway friends and family, attend important conferences, and most importantly, see my grandchildren, flying is a necessity. If I want new clients to replace those who will inevitably depart, if I want to grow my business, or even if I just want to stay in business, prospecting is not optional. There's a line in the movie Miracle on Ice about the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team where the coach would frequently say, the legs feed the wolf, the legs feed the wolf. And he was determined that the guys would have legs as strong as the Soviet team they were facing. And he drilled them on that. And so in sales, I say prospecting feeds the wolf.
Okay.
And, what's the first reason salespeople fail? Because they don't get in front of people. And the second reason is because they get in front of people, but they don't sell anything. They don't say the right thing. I always say sales problems are really pretty simple. You don't get in front of enough new people, don't know what to say when you get there.
Yeah.
So the prospecting, to me, the first thing is accept the fact that you have to do it, or else go find a company that will hire you for sales and tell you that prospecting is not part of your job.
Yeah, they just feed you the prospects.
Yeah, but I certainly believe that commissions are higher and more money is to be made if you are in a sales role where you prospect also.
Yeah.
So the advice, well, like I said, there's some things in the book about it, and I certainly talk about that issue more about the cold calls. I had to be honest with myself, and I never said to myself, oh, this is a lot of fun, I liked it. I just did it.
Yeah.
It was not optional. It's kind of like getting up at 5:30 and going running or going swimming. I just do it.
Yeah.
And if I ever hesitate and say, do I want to get in the pool at 5:30? No. The answer is no. It's always no. But after it's over, I feel so good. So it's kind of a just do it. That's my short advice.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. And I'm one of these people, most of my business, I just get through relationships because I don't go out actively marketing. I just, people
Well, you've
get,
also been at it a few years too, though, right?
yeah. And people get to know me and, we get to know each other personally. I learn about what they need. They learn about what I do. And then we figure, oh, I can help you or whatever. And I love that. But if you're, the cycles come and go, or if you're in a position that you either need work for some reason or whatever, when we started our first business, cold call did not bother me at all. I could have cared less, but we were selling like a service. We weren't selling our knowledge. I'm terrible about doing sales calls because I feel like it's me. You know what I'm saying? I'm terrible about cold calling with that, which is why everything has evolved into basically relationship building. And of course, once I have clients, I have them for years. I have a government agency that's been a client of mine since 1997, which is like crazy long time for a government office. So usually when I work with people, we tend to work together for a really long time. But I don't have a system for going out and finding, regularly finding new clients. And because I was caring for my mom with Alzheimer's and things like that, I kind of turned into a hermit, and I got out of the swing of, being out, being seen and everything.
Well, I think one point you're raising is the good news that cold calling is not forever. Cold calling for most people is just until they get enough of a client base that they can start mining it for referrals and working the relationship aspect you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think cold calling, even though in today's world, most people tell me they don't cold call, they're not going to cold call, they don't think it works anymore. I believe cold calling is good for two things. The first thing it's good for is it strengthens your gut or your spine or whatever part of your body needs strengthening. If you can make cold calls and deal with what happens in 100 cold calls or 1,000 cold calls, it's going to toughen you up. The second thing it does is if you can start a conversation with a prospect from a cold phone call, you can start any conversation. It is the best training for delivering what I call your 30-second commercial, your initial opening lines. And if you can make it work in a cold call, you can make it work anywhere. That's the hardest prospecting there is. Everything after that's easy. So I suggest strongly to the people I coach, I don't care if you don't get any business off of cold calls. I just want you to make a couple thousand to strengthen your gut and to get you better at prospecting.
Those are great points. So So would you say start with people that you really don't even care whether you get them or not, or go for the big fish from the
Start
get?
with people in Alaska. Start with people that you're never ever going to encounter. I
Yeah,
don't care who you start with.
yeah,
Just make calls.
just so you get your sea legs, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. And like you said, even if you don't need to be cold calling, just that practice, getting that 30-second elevator speech down,
yeah. And
being able to succinctly describe what it is you do or how you can
right,
help them. Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah.
now I got to call 2,000 people.
Well, it's only 20 a day for 100 days.
Oh God. I think I'd rather go out and run, and I hate to run.
Okay.
No, I'm just joking. But I'll tell you, on LinkedIn, I hate this. And then I feel bad for the people that I hate it, but it's like somebody will reach out, you'll connect with you, accept the connection, and immediately they send you a pitch through messaging. I'm just like, oh my God, I can't stand that. But then I feel bad for them because I know they're probably working, they're trying to get those 2,000, they're trying to get those numbers in. But I guess it's the difference in the kind of business that I'm in. I'm not in a huge volume business. I don't need hundreds or thousands of clients.
I would say no need for you to start making cold calls. Or
Okay,
no need for you to restart making cold calls because you
yeah,
apparently have made some.
yeah, definitely have made some over the years. So, what do you think your biggest like mistake or um, the biggest problem or the biggest mistake you made, the biggest faux pas or whatever, and when you were getting started in your transition?
Well, one thing I've learned as salespeople is we all have a few sales calls we wish we could have back. And usually the reason we wish we could have them back is so we could tell that prospect to get lost.
Yeah,
We kind of, we want to take all those prospects that either lied to us or ghosted us or took our information and used it somewhere else. We kind of want to get back at them. And so once again, sales is no place to get your emotional needs met. If you feel the need to get back at somebody, drop it, forget it. There's no need for that. But if I was going to go back and tell myself 21 years ago, starting in sales, what I would say is don't try to get back at these people, but be much more willing to let them go.
yeah,
And stop trying to convince anybody to buy anything. Help them self-discover. And if it doesn't fit for them, let them go. Let them go. And the thing that I tell, the way I kind of summarize that with the people that I coach now is I frequently say to them after they tell me about a sales call, I say, it sounds to me like you were working a lot harder than the prospect. Never work harder than the prospect. The prospect needs to work harder than you. What does that mean? They got to want it.
yeah,
Don't expect me to sit there and try to beg you to buy what I'm selling. It needs to be almost the opposite. You need to convince me that you need to buy this. So that's one thing that I would change if I could go back is I would stop trying to convince people of anything. Start earlier trying to help people self-discover why they might need what I have. And if they don't, it's
let
goodbye.
go. Both of those that's great advice, both of those things. And I think many of us, it's like we're like a dog with a bone. I can get them to see this. I can get them to understand why they need it instead of cutting the line and going into the next one. Maybe they will figure out they don't need it, but either way, we haven't wasted our time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hold your book up again so people can see the
Okay.
cover, so they'll recognize it. So the art and skill of sales psychology, is that it?
Yes, the art and skill of sales psychology.
Yeah,
Why buyers and sellers do what they do.
yeah, I ordered it a couple weeks, well, last week, so it's probably be here tomorrow.
Well, you can get any book at Amazon. You can also
Yeah,
get this one at shop.sandler.com.
Okay.
I don't know if it's any cheaper there than Amazon, probably about the same, but
Yeah.
either one.
Well, I'm excited to read it, and
Well, thank you.
thank you so much for coming on. And sometime I want to hear more of your submarine stories. 'Cause-
You'll have to ask that guy there.
yeah, that's right. 'Cause subs, it's like they're fascinating to me, but I would be so terrified.
Well, every submariner has a lot of submarine stories, and if you ever want to spend 30 minutes listening to submarine stories, I got plenty of them.
Yeah, I do want to hear some of them.
Okay.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I had a great time talking with you, learned lots.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, I learned a lot, and now you've motivated me to work on some of the things that I know that I've been needing to work on that I have let fall by the wayside. And so I'm really excited to read the book. Can't wait for it to get here. And if you know anybody that you think would like to come to the event Saturday, please let them know.
Okay. And if you do make a cold call, I guess you'll be disrupting your now.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much, Brad.
Okay.
I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks for having me. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.